Well, thank you everybody for being here. That's good. So I began the meditation with the 5 remembrances, and for those who joined late, I'll just quickly run over what they are. They are something that many people repeat each day. Many monks do, I believe. I am the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. And number 5, my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. I think what this is saying is don't look away, realize what you're seeing. You can also substitute the word we instead of I. You know, I imagine the first time hearing this, at least for me, I had a strong reaction to it. And, you know, some people think it might be rather morbid. My initial reaction to it was, wow, this is kind of cool. It made me feel inspired to be alive and present and make the most of what I have. And since then, it's gone back and forth, honestly, but I think it's very powerful, and I wanted to start it today. Perhaps the 5th one is the most interesting, maybe, that my actions are my only true belongings, and I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. They are the ground upon which I stand. So this is about karma. And it's said that that while you own your actions, you cannot count on the fruits of your actions. So it's really about what we do is the thing. Anyway, what I want to start out by talking about which I sometimes like to do, is a short little personal experience of something that was just present for me this week, and then that'll lead us into the topic. And okay, so for a few days earlier this week, I really had some really strong fear and insecurity. It was really fear upon fear, and maybe a lot of deep loneliness feelings were coming up too. And, you know, I'll spare you the details of it, but everything is fine. It's not that there was anything, it was more existential in a way. And but what happened next was, after this lasted for a little arc of time and made for a difficult few days for me, it started to change, as everything does. And but what happened was, I became aware of the desire for the negative, difficult feelings to go away. And I think that's a really good starting point. We can't make them go away necessarily, but I became aware of it, that that's what I wanted, and that it wasn't in my control to force this change. So, in other words, I needed to be present with the suffering, and I needed to stay aware of the situation. And what I could do, of course, I would do. Maybe not, of course, but what I could do, I can do, and what I couldn't do, I couldn't do. But I needed to be present with that. And that knowing was part of the door that opened that allowed it to eventually change. And being patient with the fact that I was feeling so crummy was hard to do, but it was better than not. I'd be jumping out of my skin, or being patient and, okay, this is going to pass, this will change, and it'll change when it changes, so let me do something else. But what happened for a little while before all that was, there were a lot of second arrows, and a lot of stories added on. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get old and die. Oh my God, this is going to happen. Oh boy, what about this and what about that? And I'm going to be forgotten and all this stuff that doesn't quite make so much sense. What really changed a lot of it for me was connecting with the Sanghas this week and heart-based meditation. Also, generosity helped, but not as much in this case. Um, there was a moment where I ran into a homeless person in a bathroom in Central Park, and I was generous and gave him a few dollars and listened to him for a few moments too. And honestly, it was a little bit, for me, I wasn't fully in it. I was doing the actions more than I felt it, but still, if that's what I had, that's what I had at that moment. And it was still better than not. So, but what really helped was a heart-based meditation. Somebody reminded me in one of the meditation groups I was at, and I was like, oh yeah. And then things started to loosen up. And being with Sangha, being with like-minded people, it's so important to know when you need a little help or when you can use a little help, even if you don't need it. And then what happened? When there was some space about needing, for instance, I began to examine things. So there I was for a few days thinking, oh, I'm so needy. I'm going to need help with this. I need help. That wasn't really accurate. There were times we absolutely need each other, and there are times we absolutely need help. But there are times that we could just use some help. It doesn't mean we're incapable. It doesn't mean we're weak. I was probably a little bit more in the time where I could use help through this. And connecting with friends was what made a big difference. And then I had an insight about loneliness, about the old loneliness. I'm not just talking about being alone. I'm talking about a deeper feeling of loneliness. And the insight I had was, it doesn't hold up. I have a lot of friends and I have a lot of people that care about me. And then if I go to the topic of being lonely, maybe I don't have to repeat this little phrase that has been going on my whole life, but I don't like being alone. There are times I like being alone. That was a nice insight. And then this sort of shifted a little bit more into a practice of noticing the good. Particularly, I don't notice it within myself so well sometimes when I'm in that state. And then I noticed that I was really able to cope with the strong emotion and that I was okay. And then here I am. So maybe we'll make up a few lines for me that can be different to the 5 remembrances. At times, I'm of the nature to need help. At times, I am of the nature to have trepidation. And I am of the nature to cope with difficult emotions. So as that was happening, I happened to read something by a Zen priest named Zenju Earthland Manuel. And I'd like to read a little bit of what she wrote. It's about fear from an article called The Terror Within. Okay, and here's what she says. This is just an excerpt from it or so, paragraph or two. Most of us are aware of the extent of the fear that we carry. Fear builds upon itself, or more precisely, fear creates more fear. As a result, our accumulated fear becomes a deep-seated terror that is challenging to uproot. If we view fear as terror, as a pervasive human condition rather than one bound to singular events and incidents, we are more likely to feel the urgency of attending to it. I really like that. I really like that a lot, because we look at this as, this is not just, oh, I'm scared of X. This is a human emotion, like so many other human emotions. Well, then we're part of the soup together with everybody. But this is just part of being alive. If we look at it that way, then maybe we have a better chance to figure out how to deal with this, strong feeling. And then she says, we constantly speak of terrorism in the world, but we don't necessarily acknowledge the terror that has invaded our inner worlds. Instead, we present ourselves as brave and courageous. Many of us are afraid of fear and afraid of admitting even to ourselves that we feel it. We push back the visceral body experience of fear so effectively, we think we have eliminated the fear itself. However, if we look around or within, we find that fear is often hidden and masked. The person who appears to be the center of the party might well be the person who fears her own invisibility or rejection. The longer we mask our fear, the more we experience the terror of our inauthenticity, perhaps creating chronic anxiety and despair. An ongoing red alert sounds off in response to the threats that the terror we mask might be exposed. We might even say that the terror, as in the outer world, can become systemic within us. We become our own terrorists. And we try many strategies to eliminate the feeling of terror by rearranging our external lives like furniture in our house. If I change the way I look, if I'm less afraid, I'd be less afraid if I have more money to maintain a particular appearance, I'd be less afraid. Or if I live in a particular city or neighborhood, I'd be less afraid. But all of these strategies, she says, are bound to fail. And at some point, we need to confront the terror within. So following the Buddhist path, she says, first, we need to unmask the fear. We need to let go of pretending we have no fear. If we pretend to be unafraid, we look as if we're disinterested or disconnected from everyone and everything. Fear is a part of being human. Okay. Yay, fear is a part of being human. Yippee. Well, what does the Buddha say? Buddha says about suffering, dukkha, birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, illness is dukkha, death is dukkha. Association with the unbeloved is dukkha, and separation from the loved is dukkha. And the last one, not getting what is wanted is dukkha. Well, that last one really resonates with me a lot of times. I found a contemporary list of causes of suffering that I thought was quite interesting too. And I'd like to read at least part of it. And wondering if you'd like to ask yourself if any of these feel relevant to you as you hear them. Resistance to impermanence is suffering. Seeing yourself as separated and disconnected from others is suffering. Clinging to your identity. Let's see. Wanting reality to be something it's not. That's a big one. Anytime you want or even demand that your reality is different than what you want, you suffer. It's just not what's happening. So you resist. Listening to outside forces instead of listening to your own truth. He who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened. This is Lao Tzu. Living a divided life. What she means by this is a life in which our words and actions conceal or even contradict truths that we hold dearly. And yet our culture counsels us to do exactly that. So that's a difficult one. Living from the outside in other words, an unexamined life causes suffering. Here's one that I found quite relevant to what I just talked about. Choosing fear over love. You have two choices around how you lead your life. You can choose fear or love. Fear produces thoughts that can cause a contraction in our hearts, minds, and bodies. You restrict yourself, you protect yourself from life itself. There's no way to achieve fulfillment and potential when you live out of fear. You're constantly hiding. Only when you choose to live from a place of love can you generate optimism and courage and compassion. When you live from love, everything becomes possible, she says. I'll read a few more of this, 3 or 4 more. Seeking security and certainty in an uncertain and ambiguous world causes suffering. Living in the past or future causes suffering. I think sometimes it can cause suffering, but not always, in my opinion. Playing the victim. Seeking comfort over growth. That's an interesting one to think about. Not choosing for yourself. and denying parts of yourself. So however we look at it, I mean, to me, this list by this author, her name is Alicia M. Rodriguez. To me, that list, they probably all can fall into the Buddha's list in one way or another. But I liked it because it's contemporary, and in some ways, for me, it's easier to relate to those things. Okay. But the main point is, yeah, we all suffer. It's part of our human condition. And with all these causes of suffering, we've heard this before, but what do we know is behind all the suffering? What's the main cause? And the Buddha says the root cause is attachment, it's clinging and aversion. So sure, that's exactly what was happening to me this past week. But yet, suffering can be a doorway to our personal evolution and to growth and expansion. And if you choose to shift your thoughts and perceptions, that can be true. And when the attachment, the clinging, the grasping is not present, then what? Well, then there's peace, I would think. And perhaps with that peace, we might be able to awaken spiritual energy. So, hope everybody's following this train of thought so far. So, if we are awakening spiritual energy, what can we do to help awaken that? And my friend Sheila, who's a teacher and a meditation teacher, was talking about Kundalini yoga and pure energy, which I'm not really experienced in this, but I'm going to basically say what she said. To pure the mind, what needs to happen first is the knots of illusion need to be pierced. Do this by softening the heart. It's in the heart. Fill the heart with love and paying attention. And watch your thoughts and the company you keep. Take effort to find people who are on the same heart wavelength. And then what to do with intense emotions? We can make it safe for ourselves to let these feelings come up in meditation so we can explore them. And if we can keep our attention, even if it's painful and difficult to look at, we could acknowledge them and we could hold them in our awareness and let our consciousness dissolve that. And take the energy of negative emotions and let them dissolve into your higher consciousness. And that's the general point she was making that is being taught about spiritual energy. But don't try to do all this at once. It's too much. You know, there's a lot of tough stuff going on. Take a break. Turn on the television, go for a walk, call a friend, do something, play guitar. That's one of my favorite go-tos. You know, you don't have to tackle everything. That's not the idea, is to be perfect here. The idea is to grow so that you can better deal with the suffering. So heart practices are so important. And of course, in the Buddhist tradition, the heart practices are the Brahma Viharas, the divine abodes. And they make up 4 meditation practices to cultivate the heart. So we all have the potential to abide in these practices: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. We could think of these as tools. And with the help of these practices, we can uncover the soft spot of bodhicitta, the soft spot. And we'll talk about bodhicitta in a minute. And we'll find that tenderness in sorrow, and that there's tenderness in gratitude. And we'll find it behind the hardness of rage and in the shakiness of fear. We'll find that tenderness. It's available in loneliness. It's available in fear. And it's available in kindness too. And maybe what we can learn is that love doesn't need to be dependent on ideal circumstances. Rather, we can learn to recognize, awaken, and develop love so it becomes the natural dwelling place for us. And when we learn how to do this and develop this, the capacities for this become an inner wealth. And I would say probably more valuable than any outer riches. So let's now move into bodhicitta. What is that? And here now I'm going to lean on Emma Chodron. And so this is a little conglomeration today of my exploration of this particular topic. And I think some of these people say it probably a lot better than I ever would. So it's I hope you don't mind that I'm sharing it that way. So Pema Chodron says about bodhicitta that it's the mind of enlightenment. It's always available in pain as well as joy. And she lays out how to cultivate the soft spot of bravery and kindness. Then she says, if we were to ask the Buddha, what is bodhicitta? He might tell us that it's a word that's easier to understand than to translate. He might encourage us to seek out ways to find its meaning in our own lives. He might tantalize us by adding that it is only bodhicitta that heals, that is capable of transforming the hardest of hearts and the most prejudiced and fearful minds. So what does that word mean? Let's break it apart. Citta means mind, heart, or attitude. And bodhi means awake, enlightened, or completely open. Sometimes the completely open heart and mind of bodhicitta is called the soft spot, a place that's vulnerable and as tender as an open wound. It's equated in part with our ability to love. And I like this line, even the cruelest people have this soft spot. That's interesting. And even the most vicious animals love their offspring. Bodhicitta is also equated in part with compassion, our ability to feel pain that we share with others without realizing it. We continually shield ourselves from this pain because it scares us. We put up protective walls made of opinions, prejudices, and strategies, barriers that are built on a deep fear of being hurt. These fears can be really subtle and they can be really strong, but I do believe that we do put up a lot of walls, and the more we can notice them, the more we can manage better, and the more we have a chance of thriving. Okay, these walls are further fortified by emotions of all kinds. They're fortified by anger, craving, indifference, jealousy, envy, arrogance, and pride. But fortunately for us, the soft spot, our innate ability to love and to care for things and about things, is like a crack in these walls we erect. It's a natural opening in the barriers we create when we're afraid. With practice, we can learn to find this opening. So we can never know what's going to happen to us next. And we can try to control the uncontrollable by looking for security and predictability, always hoping to be comfortable and safe. But the truth is, we can never avoid uncertainty. This not knowing is part of the adventure, and it's also what makes us afraid. We can learn to seize that vulnerable moment, love, gratitude, loneliness, embarrassment, inadequacy, to awaken bodhicitta. The Buddha said we are never separated from enlightenment. Even at times we feel most stuck, we are never alienated from the awakened state. This is a revolutionary assertion. Even ordinary people like us with hang-ups and confusions have this mind of enlightenment called bodhicitta. The openness and warmth of bodhicitta is in fact our true nature and condition. Even when our neurosis feels far more basic than our wisdom, even when we feel most confused and hopeless, bodhicitta, like the open sky, is always there. It's always here, undiminished by the clouds that temporarily cover it. So that's kind of what I have to share today. I think that when, maybe I'll sort of sum it up by saying that when difficult emotions come up, a lot of strong negative emotions come up, perhaps the teaching is to not look away and to realize what we're seeing and to have the courage for that. And if it's too much, take it slow, let it have its time, be patient with it. But rather than forcing and fighting our way through these type of emotions and these type of experiences. And rather than trying to change the external world all around us beyond what we can do, let's change what we can do. And then let's see if we can settle back and accept that sometimes dukkha exists and sometimes it's not present. And say, oh, having a tough time today. Okay. That's too bad. Okay. That's okay. Let it be rather than fight it. And then you'll see that perhaps there may be more chances for more realization and more chances for better coping mechanisms to come and more strength to get developed for the next time. Because there will be a next time. And there'll also be joyful times too. There'll be a next time too. With that, I hope this is helpful. And thanks for listening. So let's just open it up